Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. We're going to be talking today about the recent announcement by the President of the United States to forgive the student loan debt of any student that has over, student that has over $10,000 in guaranteed student loans, and they're going to forgive $10,000 of that for students that make less than $125,000 a year. There's also provision that will forgive another $10,000 for those who are in a special dire need. So this is a huge, massive new spending bill that the President of the United States, by his own fiat decision, can make for some reason. I don't know how that is possible in the United States. I don't see how a president of the United States can actually just decide that he's going to forgive some transactions that were arranged by private parties, even with the government. I can't understand how that much power can be given to one man. Why is this taking place? Well, we'll find out. We'll answer and raise some of those questions. But let's jump into an article that we're going to be looking at today in the Post-Journal, New York paper Post-Journal. And we're going to read the article and then discover what is taking place here. We've never seen anything like this before in the history of our country, as far as just simply forgiving millions and millions and millions of student loan debt. We've never seen anything like this. So let's jump into the article here. Here it is. And I will read it along with you, and we will take a look at this. This is unprecedented. And from a Christian biblical worldview, we want to understand how we should think about this as Christians. There are many, many churches that simply talk in terms of a very narrow gospel. They only talk about Jesus Christ and your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. They don't venture into the other teachings of the Scripture. You know, the Bible is a big book, and it's got the Old Testament, it's got the New Testament, it's got commands and promises, and it has all kinds of content. And as Christians, we want to know how to live in this world. We want to know how to think in this world. We want to know how to be disciples of Jesus Christ in this world. It isn't simply the case that once we receive Jesus Christ as Savior and He saves our soul, we're on our own and now we can do whatever we want. No, we are now disciples of Jesus Christ. We're supposed to follow after Him. And how are we supposed to follow after Him if we don't know what He wants us to do? And so many, many churches have just distanced themselves from any conversation about anything in our culture and simply said, you're all on your own in those political, cultural, moral issues. We're just going to talk about Jesus and Jesus and your relationship with Jesus, and that's it. We're not going to wade into the waters of controversy. If anything's controversial, we're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But that is disaster. That is not the way of Christ. That is not the Christian worldview. The early church transformed the Roman culture. And they didn't do that by simply talking in terms of me and Jesus and me and my relationship with Jesus alone. They talked about how do you live in a pagan world? How do you influence your community? How do you influence your family? How do you have a marriage? How do you have a community? How do you have a school? You know, all of these issues are fair game for Christians because we have information given to us by God from the Bible. So if we don't listen to what God says in the Bible, if we don't teach what God says in the Bible, then we are simply saying to people and Christians who have converted to Christianity, we're saying to them, you're just on your own. You're just on your own. It's all just about you and Jesus having a good time, and all these other issues have nothing to do with the church or your Christian faith. No, that's wrong. They do have something to do with our Christian faith. And even this issue here, big student loan forgiveness plan, how we should think about this. And from a Christian perspective, I can tell you right off the bat, it sounds really bad. Now, you say, well, wait a minute, isn't forgiving a student loan a good thing? Wouldn't that help students? You have to back up and you have to ask yourself, how did students get involved with a student loan program? I was a student once. I went to college once, and I took out 2 student loans. I took out a student loan when I was at Wheaton College, and I took out a student loan when I was at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School for my Master of Divinity degree. One was $2,000 and the other was another $2,000. So I took out a guaranteed student loan through the government program, and they backed the loan. That's what the guaranteed student loan government program means, that when you go in to the application, you fill out the loan application, and the government, the U.S. government, backs that loan and says, we will pay it if you can't. We will pay it, and then we will demand that you over time pay it. So they'll set up a system. This happened to me. You take a student loan out, the government backs it up. They're the lender of last resorts. And so then after you get out of college or graduate school or whatever the case may be, you then you get a grace period. I think it's about 6 months. You get a grace period. You don't have to begin to make payments right away. But then every month you have, and what I literally got was a ticket stub, and I got a book. And every month there was an amount to be paid, and then you send that in with a check. You write a check out for that amount. I think I had to pay, I think it was $40 a month. I can't remember exactly right now, but I think I had to pay $40 a month every month, year after year, until that was paid. And I think it took about 3 years for me to pay that totally off. It could have been 5 years. I'm not sure. It was 3 to 5 years it took for me to pay that off. So that was every month, every day in and day out month, I would have to write a check for $40. And you just do it. You don't like to do it. Sometimes it's very difficult to do it. If you don't have a good paying job at that moment and you're trying to pay your other bills, a lot of times it's very difficult to pay that guaranteed student loan. But you do it because you obligated yourself to do it. You sign in a dotted line. You have to remember, these are college age students, people. They're legal adults, usually 18 or over, and you've signed on the dotted line. You're legally an adult. You can be drafted in war. You can take out a loan at a regular bank. The legal drinking age. Not that I advise you to go out and drink, but and there are moral ramifications for doing that. But there is an age of 18, and you can legally drink. You can legally do all kinds of things that you couldn't do when you were below 18. So these students, most of them took out a student loan. They were adults, considered classified adults. And so they obligated themselves to doing that. Well, what you do is after you get out of your school, after you get your degree, after you graduate, or even if you don't graduate, if you drop out of school, you still are obligated to pay for the amount of education you received. And so you make your payments every month. And then at the end of that process, you're all done and you go your own way. And it's difficult, it's painful, it's hard, but you have to manage your budget and you have to do it anyway. Well, Joe Biden, the President of the United States, just wiped out $10,000 in student loan for individuals, millions and millions of college students, simply with the stroke of a pen. And that is teaching irresponsibility. And not only that, it's not fair. It's not fair to those people who didn't go to college, but then say invested in starting a small business. They took out a business loan. Are those business loans going to be forgiven now because it's hard to pay back? No, they're not. It's just the students. It's just the college students who get their loans forgiven. That's not fair. In addition to the fact that we can't afford to shelve out billions and billions or close to $1 trillion. Some estimates say it's going to actually cost not just $30 billion, but it's going to actually $300 billion. It's actually going to cost closer to $900 billion, which is getting pretty close to $1 trillion to do this. So let's read the article and explain why this is really a foolish idea. And it's just another socialist welfare program, you might want to call it. It says President Joe Biden, here he is, right there. President Joe Biden on Wednesday announced detailed plans to deliver on a campaign promise to provide $10,000 in student debt cancellation for millions of Americans. Remember, he's not forgiving the debt. The debt is not against him. He is forgiving the debt, and it's not even his debt. He didn't back the loans. So he's forgiving students of a debt, and that's not even owed him. It doesn't cost him a penny to forgive these student debts. Who's it cost? It costs the taxpayer. It costs the working people. If you're working right now and you have taxes taken out, you are paying for these students to have their debt forgiven. Not Joe Biden, and there's nothing that the U.S. government is doing other than just making you pay for these loans that are being forgiven. And up to $10 million, deliver a campaign promise to provide $10,000 in student debt cancellation for millions of Americans. That's millions of students who agreed to take out this loan, and now they're being told, oh, you don't have to pay that loan back. Up to $10,000. $10,000, that's a lot. And up to $10,000 more for those with the greatest financial need, along with the measures to lower the burden of repayment for the remaining federal debt, student debt. Okay, so he's going to fiddle with the payback formula, and we can only guess what he's going to do there. He's probably going to string it along and say, you pay for 20 years, and then at the end of 20 years, everything's canceled. This is a socialist giveaway program. And it's very suspicious because it's a giveaway program aimed at voters that he knows he wants to have in the midterm elections coming up in a few months. And he wants these students who he's forgiven their $10,000 debt, he wants them to remember the Democrats at the polls. It's a giveaway program to buy votes. Borrowers who earn less than $125,000 a year or families earning less than $250,000 a year would be eligible for the $10,000 loan forgiveness. So you can actually be a family that is earning $249,000 a year, and you can still get this forgiveness. I mean, if you're earning $249,000 a year, you are not poor. And the government is just going to write off $10,000. Or if you're an individual and if you're making $124,000, if you're making $100,000 a year, you are not a poor individual. And yet the government's going to give you welfare of $10,000 to wipe out that portion of your student loan. That is absurd. So this is going to benefit a lot of people who don't actually need this. Biden announced, for those who also receive Pell Grants, which are reserved for the undergraduates with most significant financial need, the federal government would cancel up to $10,000 in federal loan debt. So the Pell Grant. Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic, Biden said in remarks at the White House. No, it's not, because these are the privileged class people in this country. If you are a college educated, if you are able to go to college, you are not the very poor, and you're not the working and middle class poor. So what this welfare goodie is targeting is the working middle class who are going to have to pay for the college debt of people who were able to go to college for some degree. That's not fair. Why should a working class person have to pay for any of the college debt for anybody? Why shouldn't the college person have to pay for the business startup money for these people who chose not to go to college? I mean, why are they starting to give away money to certain segments of society and not to other certain segments of society? It's in the name of justice, you're being unfair. Biden is also extending a pause on all federal student loan payments for what is called the final time through the end of 2020. So student loan debt has been on pause basically for the last 2 years during the pandemic as a goodwill gesture to students during this financial time of the pandemic. All students get to not have to make payments. And so he's doing another pause until the end of 2022. And then at the end of the 2022, he's probably going to have some kind of greater forgiveness than just $10,000. He's probably going to say all student debt. We don't know. You know, once you start that ball rolling, you don't know where it's going to end. Now, this is breeding irresponsibility. That's exactly what it does. It breeds irresponsibility. You know, you have students who say, hey, you know, I'm going to have my student debt wiped out and I don't have to worry about paying these back because, you know, Joe Biden and the Democrats, they're just going to roll my debt over on the working class, middle class, and let the middle class pay for it. That is what they're going to start doing, students, and that is irresponsible. Also, colleges are going to start jacking up their tuitions even more because, hey, they can charge whatever they want because the federal government's going to bail them out. Says, and then Joe Biden is saying the rhetoric is that this is going to help working class and middle class people hit. No, it's going to help the people who have been able to go to college, who actually have better prospects for jobs. It's going to help them even advance further at the expense of the middle class, working class. If his plan survives legal challenges that are almost certain to come, it could offer a windfall to many in the run-up of this fall's midterm elections. See, this is the paying for votes. More than 43 million people have federal student loan debt with an average balance of $37,000. An average balance of $37,000. I thought my $4,000 was a lot of money. It weighed on my shoulders, the $4,000. But the average debt for student loans is $37,000. That's astronomical. Nearly a third of borrowers owe less than $10,000, and about half owe less than $20,000. Well, good. I'm glad they didn't overextend themselves. But yet now they're looking to the government to have even that wiped out. The White House estimates that Biden's announcement would have raised the federal student debt to about 20 million people. Yeah, 20 million people really love the fact that Joe Biden is forgiving a debt that he really doesn't, nobody owes him anything. He's forgiving it on behalf of the middle class. No, I don't think the middle class consented to that. No, I don't think the working class person wants to go and slave away at a job, maybe assembly line work, and come home and realize, hey, I just worked a number of hours so that somebody else that I don't even know can get their college education. Isn't that great? No, that is not fair. Proponents say cancellation will narrow the racial wealth gap. Black students are more likely to borrow federal student loans and at higher amounts than others. 4 years after earning a bachelor degrees, black borrowers owe an average of nearly $25,000 more than their white peers, according to Brookings Institute. And they also have a better prospect for a higher paying job. So that's the trade-off. You know, you You take out the loan because you made the calculation that I can get a better job if I have an education. And so you weigh that in the decision making. And now the government's saying, well, you don't even have to weigh that now. We'll just give you these student loans forgiveness, and you don't even have to think about it. It's irresponsible, not only on the part of the people that took out these loans and claim they can't pay them back, but it's irresponsible on the part of the government to say, we will forgive you. No, you are not in a position to forgive. You need to take a vote on all the people that will be paying those debts back to see if they want to forgive them. That's what you need to do if you're going to make it fair. The White House emphasized that no one in the top 5% of incomes would see any loan relief. Oh, well, okay. Of course. But top Republicans were not persuaded. Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell said the President Biden's inflation is crushing working families, and his answer is to give away even more government money to elites with higher salaries. Democrats are literally using working Americans' money to try to buy themselves some enthusiasm from their political base. That's exactly correct. He's going to load working Americans with more national debt. We already have over $30 trillion in debt, and now this federal loan program that's being forgiven, that's going to add to that crushing debt. And guess who pays? Taxpayers. In fact, many Democrats, from congressional leaders to others facing tough re-election bids this November, have pushed the administration to go as broadly as possible in debt relief, seeing it as a galvanizing issue, particularly for black and young voters. So it is politics. A lot of this is politics. The extension of the pandemic-era payment freeze comes just days before millions of Americans are to find out when their next student loans will be due. The current pause is to end August 31st. Okay, so he's working the students over for their votes. He's giving away some goodies, and he's hoping that they show up at the polls and thank him for that. The administration said the Education Department will release information in coming weeks for eligible borrowers to sign up for debt relief. Cancellation for some will be automatic if the department has access to their income information, but others, they will need to fill out a form. Current students would be eligible for relief only if their loans were originated before July 1st, 2022. Biden also proposing capping the amount that borrowers must make monthly payments for undergraduates at 5% of their earnings, down from 10%. So when I took out my student loan, the government could ask for at least 10% of your earnings per month. Now they're thinking, oh, make that 5%. The Education Department is to post a proposed rule to that effect, which would also cover the unpaid monthly interest for the borrowers who remain current with their monthly payments, even when the payments are zero because their incomes are low. The Biden administration plan would also raise the income floor for repayments, meaning no one earning below 225% of the federal poverty level would need to make monthly payments. So some students don't even have to make monthly payments if their income's low enough. Biden's plans builds on the $32 billion in targeted student loan debt forgiveness his administration has enacted for certain groups of borrowers. Much of that went to borrowers who say they were defrauded for public college. So he's already given out $32 billion in student loan forgiveness already. And so this latest announcement is adding to that debt. Administration also temporarily has relaxed the rules for public service loan forgiveness, a complex program that allows teachers, social workers, and other public servants to get student debt canceled after 10 years of monthly payments. So there's all kinds of stipulations. If you go into social work, you can get your loan forgiven after 10 years of making payments, no matter how much it is. The positive impacts of this move will be felt by families across the country, particularly by minority communities, and is the single most effective action that the president has taken on his own to help working families and the economy. That is a lie. He is not helping the economy by doing this. He's hurting the economy. He is flooding money into the economy, which raises interest rates, which is basically a tax on everyone's savings and everyone's earning power. He's not helping. So what is the problem? What is the problem with this from a Christian perspective? Well, first of all, we are supposed to be responsible in our decision making. We are supposed to repay our loans. We are supposed to be adults. Now, in the Bible, it talks about that the man is the head of the house, and if he sees his wife entering into a business transaction that he doesn't like, he can veto that. If you're a parent and you see that your child is entering into a purchase agreement that is bad, why? Because they're a child, they're not responsible, you can veto that. But if you're an adult, and if you have taken out a guaranteed student loan and you've done that and you've signed your name and you've obligated yourself, it is wrong for the government to come along and say, okay, we're going to bail you out, and we're not going to bail out the person that didn't go to college and decided to work real hard and get a house or buy a car or buy tools for his trade or do whatever else he wanted to do with his money. They're not going to bail that person out. Now, why not? Why aren't federal government programs in place to bail people out who are struggling with their home mortgage? You know, when I bought a home, the home I'm in right now, I took out a loan and I obligated myself to pay that, and I had to struggle until I got it totally paid off. And the government didn't come in and say, well, we're going to forgive the rest of your loan on your mortgage. No, they didn't do that. The same way with a small business person who wants to open up, say, a computer repair shop. If you borrow $50,000 from the Small Business Administration or from some bank in the area, and you're struggling to make payments, the government doesn't come along and say, hey, we're going to forgive you, $10,000 off that. No, they don't do that. Just to these students. It's not fair. It's going to breed resentment in the population. You're going to cause division in the citizenry of the nation. And it's simply a foolish decision. And not to mention, and I've already mentioned this before, but we are already burdened with a massive $30 trillion national debt. And it just keeps getting higher and higher when the government does things like this and agrees to simply forgive these students $10,000 with a wave of a hand. Who gave the President of the United States the authority to simply wave his hand and erase $10,000 of every student's loan? Who gave the president that authority? It is not the president's authority to do that. And so we have an illegitimate government action right here. And it's going to cost Americans in the long run. You can be sure of that. Well, as you can see, this is very disturbing, but we need to pray that God will give our government leaders common sense and wisdom. And we pray for our nation that he will give us all wisdom. And so we'll see you back next week on another program. God bless.